Hey everyone, it's Ellis, and this is the patch 10.11 notes rundown. I have already seen the overview for the patch, and honestly, it's making me very worried because I thought that this was going to be the big patch where I believe that this is the patch that LCS and LEC, LCK, etc. is going to debut on, so I thought that this would have much more impactful changes given that we didn't really have a true mid-season patch that sort of changed things up. However, this doesn't look very enticing. Let's just get right into it, and then obviously get to the most important part, which is the skins at the very end. So, champions, Volibear, the Relentless Storm. Interestingly enough, I haven't heard a lot about Volibear since his initial preview release. Everything aside from that has been pretty silent. I haven't heard anyone talk about him on the PBE or like anything like that. Now that worries me a bit because that makes me think that he is balanced in the sense that he's not actually good, but I really hope that I'm wrong there and that he's actually worthwhile. Fiddlesticks. Passive effigy posing time increased. Abilities cast when posing as effigy now terrify enemies. W minion damage increase. Passive harmless scarecrow. Time before effigy posing 1 second to 2 second. Q terrify. Fiddlesticks' ability now terrify enemies if cast while he is posing as an effigy. That's obviously really nice. W, Bountiful Harvest, minion damage reduction 60% to 40%. So they're being very reserved, obviously, with the Fiddlestick changes. The only people I've seen comment on Fiddlesticks being really strong have actually been from the NA region. Aside from that, I think that the general consensus is still that he's really weak and that he's very gimmicky. And so, because of that, I don't really know what to say, but we'll have to see if he ever ends up getting debuted in Pro Play when it does end up returning. Gangplank, base attack speed ratio increased. Attack speed ratio 0.658 to 0.69. They said that giving Gangplank a bump in his attack speed so he can play around faster barrel combos and potentially shoot for a Zeal item instead of other AD items means more crits, more explosion, etc. This strikes me as fairly bizarre though. So they also fixed the E-Powder Keg bug fix. Thank you, Rebecca, for that one. And the interesting thing about this is that Gangplank is actually an S tier champion, so it's so strange to actually see him be getting a buff, especially because even in competitive he's very strong. Now, in solo queue, he suffers from a couple of problems given the nature of how he wants to play and the way that he functions inside of a team. But the same can be said for many champions. It's just not every day that you see Riot actually buffing such a strong champion when it comes to competitive. So definitely a little bit odd there. Nonetheless, it is on the bit of a safe side. Graves, Q first shot damage ratio reduced. Graves has smoked out his enemies in higher level play, so we're quick drawing back some of his lethality based power by curtailing his AD ratio. Okay, so this is the weirdest thing in the world to me. They're nerfing Graves after having just buffed him, and I would imagine that the initial thought would be, you know what, let's undo the buff that we gave him, because evidently he wasn't getting picked up, he wasn't doing anything there, so maybe dialing back first with the buff that we gave him would be the first course of action. No, instead, they're going to let him keep his buff, but they're actually going to take away his damage. So, absolutely fantastic. Not even sure what the line of thought is there, but apparently it's the end of the line for that one. 1.0 bonus attack damage to 0.8 bonus attack damage. Now, it's on the first shot damage ratio. So, this is all, I mean, it's not going to change what makes Graves really strong and good right now, but it is definitely obnoxious. The fact that it's on the bonus attack damage rather than like total attack damage or something is obviously really good, though, because the way that Graves can itemize gets a little bit different every single time, depending on how you want to build him versus the enemy team or what the enemy team is going to be building. So I guess there's some flexibility there. It still is going to feel bad. You will end up probably losing like 0.4 bonus AD throughout an extended team fight, which I guess that actually can be really big, depending on what kind of value you can get on the Qs in certain fights in mid and late game. But at the end of the world, it just blows my mind that they don't undo the buff that they just gave him first and instead just go in a completely different direction with it. Hecarim, Q base damage increase, minion damage reduction increase. Q rampage base damage is up by 5 at all ranks, but, or no, sorry. Oh, okay, it scales really weird. So 55 to 215 scaling to 60 to 228. Minion damage reduction 33.3% to 40%. So they're giving a little bit more damage on his Q. I feel like this is obviously beneficial for his jungle as well as top lane. Hecarim top lane, obviously, much less common than jungle Hecarim. So this is totally fine. Now, obviously, the minion damage reduction does harm top lane Hecarim a bit, but it gives his trading potential more against the enemy champion, which is totally fine. And obviously, inside of the jungle, he'll be happy with that one. These are all just random changes so far. So we've had Volibear, who's a bit of an unknown, Fiddlesticks, who probably doesn't do anything for competitive, and then again, I don't really know what everyone's perception is on Fiddlesticks outside of the North American region. Gangplank 1 is just super random. Graves 1 super random. Nothing much is really getting changed thus far, and I feel like we're almost through the changes, right? Janna, base damage decrease later. Like, what? Zephyr, 55 to 195 to 55 to 175. Okay, so obviously they don't want Janna to just hard poke you out of the lane, but honestly, when... I don't... The last time I saw Janna, right, wasn't it the LEC finals? It was the LEC finals where she was picked situationally, and it had nothing to do with like Zephyr. So this again is, I guess, another solo queue focus change that just strikes me as completely bewildering, given that we're also having changes in this patch that affect AD carries that are going to give them more HP than what they're actually removing from the Zephyr, and so it all just is leaving my head a little bit rattled. Kai'Sa Q bonus AD ratio increased, R range increased later. As a non-Zeal marksman who is already relatively weaker than other marksman champions, we thought Kai'Sa warranted some special attention. This patch outside of the aforementioned marksman changes. Icathian Rain, 0.35 bonus AD to 0.4 bonus AD. R Killer Instinct, 1500 to 2500 range to 1500 to 3000 range. So a bit of a buff onto Kai'Sa, but none of this really addresses what is gating her. She has been coming back in professional play, and we probably will see her when summer does resume, but I don't think that it's a testament to her being a worthwhile or a good champion, rather than the AD carries are probably bored with the pull down in bot lane and the way that games can end up going. She can feel like she has an impact, but I think that that's mostly because AD carry in general probably doesn't feel as impactful ever since Riot kept hitting a lot of the AD carries throughout the entirety of the spring split, and then just having to wait until the later stages to eventually come online. Kai'Sa, though, I don't think is gonna get ever back to the heyday. Well, I mean, obviously she'll probably one day get back to the heyday that she had last year, but Kai'Sa is an answer to a meta. She's not a proactive AD carry champion pick that should ever be coming out for any reason other than to meet the conditions that are present inside of a game. That might sound really weird to some people, but it's kind of weird to describe her as a counter pick AD carry, but it kind of is, and she's not a counter pick like to the bot lane itself, but she's a counter pick to team compositions, and that's when you bring her in. Lux. E2 slow duration increased. Let's see. Additional 0.25 seconds after damage by E2. Additional 1 second after damage by E2. Okay. Syndra EQ cooldown increased. E-Scout of the week, 16 seconds to 12 seconds to 18 seconds to 14 seconds. This is another one that is just really out there. Syndra is one of the strongest performing mid laners at the moment, true, and she's usually seen as a relatively safe pick, true. We're reducing access to her stun so the enemies can take advantage of her window of vulnerability while it's down. I think that that's fine, but Syndra's already a really hard champion to actually pilot. She's a strong performing mid laner because she's relatively easy to nuke people with, and I guess in solo queue that can be really oppressive, but in competitive she definitely has weaknesses and vulnerabilities. One of the things about Syndra as well is that she's able to be flexed to multiple roles, so I guess that you have that. I think that this is definitely on one of the safer sides of the nerfs that Riot could have dished out, and so I guess we'll take it if you're a fan of Syndra. Q Talon, cost increased, heal on kill decreased early. Noxian Diplomacy, 30 mana to 40 mana, heal on kill 20 to 71 to 10 to 70, levels 1 to 18. So, Talon just getting hit again. Talon continues to be one of the most powerful mid laners in high-elo. Often with an early Q max, we're carving out some of his early sustains so he can't stall out the early lane to reach his items by. Okay. So Talon's really weird because they initially hit Talon really hard, and then it was found out that most people were just using the wrong runes and they were playing him the wrong way. and then he ended up getting fixed, and now it's leading Riot to try to take different stances towards him. This entire patch, though, has been a bit of a circus in that it doesn't really touch on anything that is actually impactful in the meta right now. All of the really problematic meta champions, or outside of Graves, I guess. Outside of Graves, any of the problematic meta champions or the really strong ones right now go completely untouched, and this is doing nothing for competitive whatsoever. So this strikes me as really bizarre because it means that we're in for another hellish summer. If this is going to end up being the case, I remember making a video. I don't remember if it was last year. It might have been last year, actually, where I made the video about the meta and how boring and bland it was. And it gets very annoying when basically no changes really happen, no diversity ends up coming out, and then because of Summer Split and how more important Summer Split is than Spring Split, for instance, you have teams and players being even more cautious and reserved, and then it ends up leading to this very stale approach to the game in terms of champion diversification. But I don't know what it'll end up meaning. Obviously, this is a very angering patch to end up reviewing. Sometimes we get these, and it's always just a disappointment and a giant letdown because this is a joke. We could have just gone without this patch ever coming out, pretty much, and I don't think anyone would care. So this is one of those patches that it just makes me think that no one cares for the last 2 weeks or something, and this is what we've ended up reaching. However, we do have Volibear in it, so we can hope that Volibear is going to produce something. Outside of that, nothing is really impactful. None of these changes are magically going to put or remove any of these champions from the position that they were already in prior to 4 hours ago or whenever, before the servers start to go down and the patch gets updated. So Marksman changes. So these are the general changes that they've given to the Marksman. Base health is up by 30 on all Marksman, right? It's up by 30, basically, on all Marksman. So they've upped every single Marksman by their base HP, and then they give them a little bit of health growth per level, about another 30 to 40 HP per level, right? On every champion, or it's just 2 HP per level, so 36 more per level. So every single Marksman gets 66 HP, roughly, which does nothing to prevent them from being blown up by the champions that are still going to blow them up whatsoever. What this does do is it increases their EHP, I guess, throughout sustained team fights, if they keep hitting max threshold at certain points, so I guess there's that value. But aside from that, it's not... this isn't... I thought we were gonna have item changes. Are we not having item changes? Oh, we are. Okay, all right, never mind. All right, let me keep getting through these. So these changes, obviously they're good at dissuading like the all-in bot lanes. They're good at helping like early jungle ganks. This is basically what this is for. It's helping alleviate early game pressure, but I don't think it does anything in late game that prevents any of the problems that Marksman are already having. Solo interchanges. The following champs are getting more specific buffs due to their ability and play rate in solo lanes. We still think they have general satisfaction and power problems like the rest of their Marksman brethren, but acknowledge that they need more tailored changes to address these issues and not just straight durability buffs, okay? Passive, Light Slinger, second critical strike chance, 75 to 100%. This is really interesting because Lucian actually, at one point in time, had a bug where he had 100%, and Riot actually corrected it to 75, and that's when Lucian was basically at his absolute peak. That's when he was just in mid lane, top lane, and bot lane, just doing stuff whenever he wanted. And it's interesting to me that they've now actually taken that bug that was present and actually gave it to him normally, and I guess they're going to evaluate what ends up happening there. Callista Sentinel Soulmark bonus damage 10 to 18% of target's max health to 14 to 18%. So a little bit of a buff once you put the first point in it, but Sentinel costs 20 mana to no mana. Vayne, Tumble basic attack bonus damage 50 to 70% total AD to 60% to 80% of total AD. Now, Vayne is a champion that tends to just build a lot of attack speed rather than AD, so this will only really help if you end up going like for crit Vayne or something, I guess, along those lines, and you end up stacking a little bit more AD, and then the argument is, do you really want that over the utility that you get from all of the attack speed items? Tristana base attack speed ratio 0.656 to 0.679. That's obviously really big for her, especially in early lane phases, because they're assessing these from the standpoint of mid Tristana, top Tristana, item zeal. Movement speed 5% to 7%, so you have to really ask yourself, what does that mean in most cases? I guess it ends up equating to 6 to 8 ms. In most cases, right? Yeah, probably 6 to 8 ms in most cases, rapid fire. All right, so this is the change basically across the board. Runon's Hurricane 7% to 9%. And then Champion Visual Effects updates, ARAM balance changes, don't care about that. Earth, Rainbow Fluffs, bug fixes. Okay, and then upcoming skins. So let's just recap really quick because I feel like this is an extremely disappointing patch. Volibear has basically everything inside of him. Everything in this patch will come down to Volibear, because outside of Volibear, I feel like 10.11 is one of the biggest disappointments of the year in terms of patches. I end up saying this every year about some specific patch. Thus far, I think 10.11 is the least satisfying. Again, I think that we could have just skipped this patch and no one would have cared. This just seems really bland, and the only thing that can potentially make it somewhat worthwhile, I guess, is Volibear. Fiddlesticks change doesn't really matter. Gangplank change out of completely left field. Graves change is obviously not that I guess I do care. I'm pissed that they didn't just undo the previous buff, because it's either them saying that I don't even know. I won't even say anything. Demonetized, jeez. Hecker MQ base damage, this doesn't matter, Donna doesn't matter, Kaisa doesn't matter, Lux doesn't matter, Syndra doesn't matter, Talon doesn't matter. This entire balance patch is one of those things that when you end up seeing it on Reddit, you see the win rates, the play rates, like, move by super slight amounts. Nothing matters. Nothing. This is a complete waste of time. I feel like I just wasted 17 minutes of my life having to read these changes. When you go into the Marksman things, I mean, those are good for early game, but they don't address the problems that Marksmen are having. Their items, like, if you look at a lot of the best Marksmen right now, you have Senna, who builds Umbral Glaive, builds Edge of Night, builds Lethality, and fasts a support champion into being a powerhouse in the game. You have Misfortune, who she has a slow and then a big setup with her R that deals obscene amounts of damage without really relying on any sort of items or anything that has to get set up for her. You have Aphelios still, who is just doing obscene things. You have Kog'Maw, who doesn't build any of the crit items. You have Ezreal, who is now building Iceborne Gauntlet, Death's Dance, and Miramana, and then Leandries and other items now. You have Soraka, 80 carry, who apparently just goes completely untouched this patch. You have, what else is even popping up? You have Varus, Lethality, who is not getting touched. So the reason that we're not seeing crit 80 carries is because crit items suck. And these changes to crit items are a joke. So if you want crit 80 carries to come back into bot lane, if you want more diversity, if you want Sivir and you want Jinx and you want, Caitlyn and you want Ashe and these other champions to come back outside of very, very specific situations, then just give their items some attention. And obviously you don't have to give the runes any attention, because when you give the runes attention, you're buffing other champions as well. And this is why, like, even some of these item changes, like, these are big buffs for Yasuo, right? There's other champions that use these items that aren't even listed here. One of the things that strikes me as really odd is why Kindred actually isn't included in any of these changes, given that there are Kindreds in high MMR that manage or do play her in the 80 carry role. But Kindred's another user of these items, and there's other champs that are using these items that they just ended up getting buff for. But I think that runes are definitely a much grosser approach if you would end up going down that route. So I think that there's some sort of a balance that has to be found. I think another problem with 80 carry starting to appear a little bit weaker in recent times is that, again, it takes very long for the champions to come online, and that's fine, but also that some of the way that the support meta has been changing up is also sort of a byproduct of that. Let's get into the skins now. This is the most important part. So we have Astronaut Poppy, one of the cutest skins in the entire world. No clue what this thing is over here. This is like a little alien, and it looks like that Nar not only caught the alien, it looks like he's gonna eat it. So that's obviously a little bit scary. And then Bard is honestly, I mean, this Bard skin is one of the best. So whoever came up with this Bard skin, I mean, this is fantastic. The astronaut skin line is really shaping up to be something that's like really, really cute and cool. I think that obviously Astronaut Nautilus is super fantastic. I think Astronaut Teemo is obviously super fantastic. Astronaut skin line is probably one of my favorite skin lines in all of League of Legends. Oh, they even have chromas. The chromas aren't really doing it for me. It ends up making Gnar look like a construction worker, or it makes him look like he's running like a black magic shop or something. I have no idea what's going on there. Astronaut Mega Gnar looks really cool. He actually turns into like a space alien. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Astronaut Poppy chromas sort of make her look like a marine, almost from StarCraft. For some reason, that's the vibe that I'm getting there. The Astronaut Bard chromas, they look kind of cool too. I'm getting some sort of like a Mario vibe. Oh, an Astronaut Teemo chroma came out. That's really cool. Oh, and Nautilus got a chroma too. Oh, that's really cool. So they're actually adding to the skin line. I think that's really nice. All in all, yeah, I think in terms of like from my favorite to least favorite, I would say that I think Bard takes the cake, and then after Bard, I would say Poppy, and then after Poppy, I would probably say Gnar, and then Nautilus, then Teemo, and that would probably be my order. You can let me know what your order would be in the comments below. This is really sad. I feel like I I was really hoping that we would get a meaningful patch, and instead we got this. So I don't know. Here's to hoping for 10-12.